Hi everyone again. Again for another interesting one. This one's called World of Review, and we're going to have a look at all things to do with critique and how to talk about our favourite books, our favourite plays, our favourite movies, our favourite games, whatever it might be. So we've got again Geordie Kerr from the State Library of Victoria and Centre for Youth Literature. She's at the end of the program, also there, and helps young adults engage with books, stories, writing, and also. Did you bring Vicky again?
I did. He comes everywhere. He loves being at festivals.
Did you get up to any mischief last night?
He disappeared into a bar for a little bit.
Naughty kids. And we've got Dylan Burns, who has trawled the depths of Australia's gaming scene for most of the past decade as a reviewer and features writer. He has written 3 novel manuscripts and is passionate about stories that have you and don't let go. So I guess I'm interested then, Dylan, is this how is writing a feature and a review and a novel, like, how are they, I mean, they're very different. So which have you been doing the longest?
Been doing video game coverage for the longest. Although I suppose if you want to go back to my fiction sort of passion was around about year 6, and I remember writing stories, like fantasy stories with my best friend in the library and ripping off fighting fantasy books. Ring a bell at all, get basically sort of fan fiction type stuff. So the underlying passion's always been fiction, but and also alongside game writing when I was at university, and it was an interest that I had, and it also was able to help me to earn some money while I was quite a poor student at the time, and then it just sort of kept snowballing, developing. So a lot of it was done over the internet and phone calls and things like that, and got some great opportunities. And yeah, as you sort of develop a reputation in that sphere, you get offered more things as you're going along.
And so did it start out from something that you would have done anyway? Like, did you want to just talk about a game that you love so much, or?
Okay. Doing sort of my own reviews. And so 15 or 16 was Hyper Magazine, and I made it my monthly columns was.
Has anyone here got any favourite magazines that they subscribe to or just buy all the time? Any particular?
All websites.
Oh yeah, websites. What's that?
Australian Geographic.
Oh, really? So when you heard Amy talking about it before, about Australian Geographic, do you love? Pitching to a magazine like that, then you've already got the understanding of what their kind of tone is and etc. How did you go about finding publications to pitch to?
So basically it was what I was interested in at the time, and when I first started out it was magazines, and then it was basically as you build a network of people, so once you sort of get into something, you build a bit of a network up and you start to know the other writers, and you sort of email them because sometimes there's a collaboration with other writers, so you might have a shared byline, and you keep those contacts fairly friendly, and then they might say, hey, I know this editor's looking for a story for this magazine that I also write for, and it just sort of have these connections that sort of stream through, and also you can go after them yourself if you, and then in your contact just say, look, I've written for this, or here's a link to a story I've got, or I think this sort of style might work for you. So it's about both being proactive and but also loving what you believe is a thing that you're able to sort of do like set your goals high, but also be prepared to have to work for it as well.
How does the networking element work online with Inky? I mean, there's users from around Australia reviewing books. Is there a networking element there as well?
There's actually not as much as we'd like,
Right.
which is interesting. But in case any of you were here last night, Inky's with the website Inside a Dog, and it's definitely a space where you can write and share reviews. I do know that publishers look at those reviews, and you will see things like, because it is about young adults promoting the books that they're liking to read, publishers will actually take grabs of reviews that have been published on that and put that on their social media feeds and things like that as a way of them being able to promote the book. In terms of actual networking between people on the site, unfortunately the site doesn't currently have those capabilities, but it's definitely something we want with a rebrand and relaunch of the site with no due date, no known date.
But I guess in a way that gives them a great platform to develop their skills and have people go, oh, well, that's done by such and such from such and such. Then they would get, I guess, develop fans as well.
Very much so. And we run different programs as well, so it's not essential with the thing that we run, but often when we're looking for applications for any particular thing that we're doing that involves book criticism in some way, we'll say you can include your Inside a Dog username or your own blog if you've got other evidence out there of work that you're doing. And we do look at that. It definitely is a factor, and it's that thing of building your own profile online in some ways, which Robbie also talked about last night. And if there's not a magazine out there that you're wanting to write for, you make your own space. The internet, you can put it out there and start to build it in whatever way and shape you want for the things you want.
You develop your brand. I mean, the character that you sort of write as.
Yes, I have my day job writing at the moment on the website. The blog content is published as Inky. It's not only me, there's one other person that does it as well. So I'm not a known name in some ways because it's all as Inky talking about books. But it's different aspects and different voices to that as well, which changes. So when I'm writing as me, I've got a particular voice, but I don't know if any of you have seen the Sesame Street documentary about like being Elmo, and they talk about creating the character of Elmo and that he's, I've forgotten his age, but like 3 years old or 5 years old or something, and he's always that age. And Inky he feels like a 7-year-old sometimes, but he's probably more about 12, and it's about using, the I pronouns and things like that, and actually trying to be consistent in being this character, which is a whole other way of writing reviews than if it was me giving my own opinion.
And when I had a monthly column where I was Sir Gameboffin, and I was like this stuffy old sort of man living in a mansion talking about video games and how it was such a trouble to get down to my letterbox to get the new game, and got to make sure when people come over I've got the right setup for everybody. So that whole developing a persona can be an interesting way to break in as well, because it's something unique and a unique angle that you have.
Does that then give you freedom to write things that you might not want to put next to your own name as well?
To an extent. I mean, I always had my name next to that.
Right.
But it definitely you can, if you want to be a bit progressive or just sort of remove yourself from something, it's a way to go if you want to explore that direction.
And a way to have fun with it too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it is enjoyable to inhabit a character, and it does affect your writing style as well.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you've all read or seen the Saturday paper. They've got this interesting review system. Have you seen what they do? They review books anonymously, so they get people to write honestly about what they think of a book, and sometimes it can be really scathing. And I guess that's what the question I was asking before. It's kind of so. What do you think about anonymous reviews? Is that a freeing thing, or is that actually not valuable for the person who's written the book or made the game or whatever?
I think there's a huge divide about anonymous reviewing versus not. I think the general line is that if you're going to say something, you should be able to stand behind it. But I can understand with some of the reactions that come come to reviews, do be aware of this if you ever review. There are people reading it, and chances are the person reading it is going to be the person that's written or created what you're writing about. I know some authors will deliberately not look at things, but a lot of them will, or they'll have friends looking at it. And if you have written something extremely unfair, you've got a very high chance of someone the author knows saying, hey, this has happened. Or other fans of the book as well will often jump in and defend the author's work. So there's a really fine line there about you need to be honest, you need to have your opinion, but you need to be able to have some weight or justification behind it. You can't be cruel for the sake of being cruel, and I can understand sometimes how it's much easier to be honest when your name's not there, especially because there's really awful things on the internet. I don't know if you've ever had it in the video game sphere, but the things about people will switch off comments often when publishing reviews because some people can just be really vicious under that anonymity on the internet.
I guess the problem with not putting your name to it is that if you are building up a fan base who trust your word and your reviews, then they won't realise that is your opinion. Me personally, when I was, or whenever I'm following a magazine or something, I tend to gravitate towards certain writers, and I tend to take their opinion on a bit more heavily than others. So that is a risk that you run if you don't have your own name attached to it. And really, you should be honest either way. And if you didn't like something, you should be able to sort of say why. But it's again an experimentation if that's what you want to do.
Yeah, that's an interesting element of your writing is that you are part of a community, and there are people that you know may be responsible for some of these games or books or plays or whatever. And if you're going to be critical, you need to be able to, justify what you're saying. Have you ever found you've pulled punches, or you've not said what you wanted to say?
Not really. I mean, the first sort of avenue of any sort of thing is to go towards your readers. So you don't really owe anything to the people who create content. If you get taken on a PR trip somewhere and they put you in a hotel and they pay for your meals, you don't owe them anything. You just owe them an honest appraisal of whatever you're seeing. And I mean, that could be a little way down the track if you're just starting out, but it's quite surprising how quickly things can snowball if you keep going with your career and keep doing well.
I'm almost the opposite. Because of my day job is working in the youth literature sphere and I work with authors, there's a really fine line between being completely honest about something, because I might have an honest opinion about not liking something, and I'm actually really cautious about putting that out there, even if it's under my own name, even if it's with a disclaimer saying it's my opinion and not my employer's, because there's a fairly high chance I will need to work with that author at some point. So sometimes I think it's almost best to, if you wish to be honest and critical in your reviews, to do it in a sphere other than the one that you may be hoping to find employment in.
I've given like 3 out of 10 reviews to games, and then the publisher won't want me to be involved in their games again. But if you've got a good editor, they'll say, well, that's who's reviewing that game. So that's an interesting difference between our industries, really. Is that we're quite separate with our reviewing. So it's interesting to hear that.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I don't know if I mentioned this before, but I also run a website called Writer's Block, and we have a review section, and we review literary journals. So they're people that are very much at the beginning of their careers and starting out, and we made the decision to only write constructive reviews. So if there was something that was not great in one of these journals, we just weren't going to mention it, because of the actual effect that would have on someone developing their work. And I think reviews can be a really interesting way of giving feedback to people that are starting out. Like, I mean, I can imagine what it'd be like if you guys, if you ever write a book and the first review you get will be something you might keep. So it is interesting because you say that the writer or the creator will be on the other end, and it does have an effect on them.
I think the two industries are a bit different too, because with video games it tends to be a very large consensus. If a game is bad, then all the reviewers are saying it's bad. Whereas with books, there's a real division of opinion on whether people So they really are two completely different fields, I feel.
Sure. Same with film and anything with a large kind of production budget.
I don't know if that happens as much with video games. If it's like sometimes things are just terrible, sure. But with books, it's that thing of different people enjoy different things, and I guess I sometimes take that sunny approach of there's a reader for every book. If someone's gone to the effort of publishing something, they believe that there is a reader out for it. Someone's put a lot of time in writing it. Someone's edited it. It's had all of this process, and there might be 5 or 100 people out there that like it, even if you don't. So it's usually only if I find that something completely crosses a moral boundary that I will step forth and be outrageous about it.
How does it go with young people? I mean, I'm a teacher, and sometimes the filter of the kids is very quick. You know, they'll review my lesson while it's happening. Is there a different filter with younger people on a website?
As in us talking to
no, as in their reviews of books. Are they much more honest?
Young adults are often really brutally honest, which we sometimes forewarn authors about, but it's an amazing thing and a beautiful thing, and sometimes that honesty is missing in the adult sphere. And when adults are doing reviews or offering a book, there's often so many different agendas behind it. You know, they want a certain outcome, but you guys are just reading books and saying what you think of them, and it builds a really great discussion. So again, I talked about last night, one of our programs, the Inky Awards with the judges, they read and critique 20 books and narrow them in half. And we just facilitate those discussions and basically say, play nicely. It's previously done by a chat, and this year we did it via video on Google Hangouts. And having 6 people in a room trying to cut half books from a list I love it.
What about it do you love? What's
the honesty, that there's things from those conversations that we would never make public. They will be very honest about what they do and what they don't like about a book, and when they love it, that passion that comes through. And there'll be different elements again, and adults think that young adults don't think critically about books, but you do, and even if you don't know the right terminology to put to it, you're talking about character and setting and all of these things. And there'll be this middle of the discussion this time, and one of the teens piped up saying, well, I really love this book and some of you didn't, but I think this book covers really important topics that should be included in the list. And they were basically talking about themes and the representation of the list as the whole with no prompting from us. And it then became a discussion about what they wanted the awards list to represent. And that it's your awards list, you get to make that decision.
Oh, that's awesome. Is there anything that you all love, like in terms of you would want to review, like film, music, books, plays? Is there anything that if you go, like say, do you go to a performance or do you see something you want to talk about it with? You know, is there something?
Yeah, probably. I know I'm very critical when reading novels, and sometimes I'll write about it like on my own kind of personal blog, but I never kind of put it out there. But yeah, probably that and performances, because I do go to a lot of performances being a performing arts student. So I'm quite critical on those type of things, but it's kind of structuring my opinion in a way that isn't going to cause conflict and isn't going, because I'm the person that doesn't have to upset anybody, but I do have a strong opinion about things. So I was just wondering, like, do you find that there is a lot of conflict when you're addressing, I don't know, especially when teens are involved and they're kind of strong minds about their own opinion?
It would depend on the space when you say conflicts. It depends on whether people are immediately present, and if it's a work you're wanting to put out and you're afraid about conflict, there are ways you can control that, like things of if we're on a blog, you can have comments switched off. And it's about, I think, claiming your own space and making it a safe space to have your voice. In terms of any conflict between the judges, you know, we do have an adult present, and it is that rules of play nicely, and say that beforehand, and it's no one's really ever breached those rules. I think if you're in a community that's loving the same thing you do, very often the same amount of respect. But yes, there's always that risk of being criticism. If you're saying something against something that someone else loves, they might want to make their opinion heard. They may not always be tactful enough to do that in a pleasant way. But I think even if you do end up with a troll or something like that, it's a bit about having the networks and finding the people that you love and making it that safe space. And depending on how you want to build your brand, if you want to build a name, it can be a pseudonym even that you want to attach, and then it's, I guess, just thinking ahead as to whether you'd like to switch from that pseudonym to something else. But you can build a profile around a name that's not your own, particularly if you're underage. Again, with the people I work with, for legal reasons, we do have government support. We don't release the surnames of under 18s, so it's just making it less Googleable.
So just review under your first name, perhaps, if you've got it. Yeah. Could be an option, I guess.
Did you ever write when you were under 18?
No.
Oh, were we on the internet when we were under 18?
Yeah, conflict. No, I'm lucky that I live in WA and I kind of just can push it away a bit. So yeah, any conflict that's arisen for me has been sort of a bit of hearsay. So it's been through editors and things like that. So I don't know a lot of advice there other than, yeah, that sounds good what you're saying.
Yeah, I've written under a pseudonym before, mainly because, like you mentioned about working for an agency, I work in schools, so I wasn't being critical of the schools, but I also wanted to be able to write about what I wanted to without, fear of that being known. So, but it is very freeing in that sense, because you're able to, be critical, but also write out what you want to. Has anyone else got any other things that they're really passionate about? Like, it could be restaurant reviews, anything like that. Is there anyone on any bulletin boards or websites that they comment on a lot? Is anyone involved with that? Facebook groups where you type in stuff when they Facebook.
Just in terms of the theatre, actually, I don't know if it's something you've already explored, but often whenever there's festivals like the National Young Writers Festival putting things on, they will often do call-outs looking for people to review shows. So I'm from Melbourne, and things like the Free Festival, the Comedy Festival, any of those where there's lots of performances, they're looking for a lot of people to be able to review content, and that's, again, usually channeled onto their own website or platform that they're collecting those.
Yeah, actually, if you're interested, I would love to have your feedback on this program and other things you're seeing as well. So maybe we can set up we get to be a bit meta. You can review the review session.
But don't forget we're around. There might be some
do it anonymously if you want.
Yes.
Because I will.
All right. So. Have you ever, this is an interesting question, have you ever had a response to one of your reviews that's been personal, or people taken, I guess, been upset about it?
I know I had a response from an author once. They did it in a really polite way, actually, and it wasn't a full review. I'd read a book that I had some serious disagreements with, and someone else read it and loved it. And I hadn't even gotten around to writing my review, but someone else that I knew had published a review and they liked it, and I commented on it saying, completely disagree, I'll tell you all about it in my own review. And even before I could publish that, I had a private message from the author saying, really interested to hear what you didn't like about it. So I actually sent them an email just saying these were the problems that I personally had with your book in as nice a way as possible. And it didn't escalate or anything, but it was, I certainly wasn't expecting from a comment on someone else's review to have an author contacting me privately going, tell me all about it.
Yeah.
With the video game industry, because video games are made by 200 people, there's a little bit less of like an author or a developer contacting any writer who's in that sort of sphere. And so it's always through the publishers themselves. So you might have the rep who's at EA or Ubisoft, or Nintendo, they will be the ones that give you the negative feedback. I've had a couple of instances where I published a negative interview, and in my comments I basically said, well, this person didn't answer this question very well, or it was just a PR line, and they then got back to me and said, negative stuff to me in an email, like, why didn't you let me know before this and all that sort of thing, which in hindsight was probably a good point as well. So, you've got to take it on board, because then from hearing that negative feedback, I thought, well, maybe I probably should have gone to them and said these questions weren't good enough. So it's just a sort of journalistic thing that I had to learn at that stage. But at the same time, if you've got your own opinion on that, you have to sort of stick to it as well. So it can be a good balancing act.
The things you learn. One of my first published reviews is terrible. It's still around online, and I think you can still read it.
No, delete that.
It's not on my site or avoid.
It comes back to haunt you.
In the previous panel, we were talking about just get stuff out there, and I think you do need to. It is strange. You are getting reviewed on your reviews, and that then helps you develop and also develop your own voice, like you were talking about before. How long do you think that took you to kind of figure out how you're going to write as a reviewer? Is that an ongoing process?
Yeah, it took a few years, and then I was lucky enough to then so I followed writers, and then I was lucky enough to get people saying that they followed me. So then you sort of feel that, oh, okay, so I'm doing something right. So that sort of reinforces what you're doing, and reinforces sort of how you approach things and that. So mine was always, it's got to be technically right and correct. It's got to be balanced. It's got to have my voice, all these things. And so I was making sure that I was actually pushing myself to be better as a writer every time I submit something. And I would sit there for hours before I submit stuff, so that I was really harsh on myself. And so, it got to the point then, probably 5 years of doing that, and then I got a bit of confidence, and it was just like, yeah, that's done, send, that's done next, sort of thing. So you get a sort of professional approach to things. So it takes a long time, but then other people are really naturally gifted, and they just manage to sort of do it very quickly and all that sort of thing. So everyone's different.
I mean, you touched one word you just said that stood out to me was balance. I mean, did you aim? Is that something you aim to do every time?
Not every time. No, sometimes you'll play a game or watch a movie and you just want to talk about one thing, or it's a personal reaction that you have. So you might want to talk about, when you were 5 years old, your dog died or something, and then you have a reaction to the movie or the game because there was a scene. So sometimes I'll just play something and just say, no, my 1,000 words or my 500 words are just going to be about this one thing. And I'm lucky enough that I would have the editor that would allow me to do that. But I would probably suggest to begin with trying to balance the positive and the negative, because you can come across too negative and critical. And being critical is not just about negative, it's about sort of talking about what were the positive things, why were they really good, and then how much did the negative tar the positive, so then you're sort of balancing the review a little bit.
With developing that voice, I guess in a way, expert, do you then get consulted about game making and things like that?
No, I don't. But that is a valid career in my field. Probably not in Australia, though. So in Australia, we're quite a narrow. There's probably about 30 to 40 professional reviewers and editors and things for video games. And in places like America and Europe, it's a lot bigger. And there are a lot of academic reviewers and writers in those countries, and they then move into companies and become writers for video games and things like that. So there are some valid paths through the industry in that way. I'm not sure what it's like for other things like, say, movie reviews in Australia. I don't know if there's many people who go on to write scripts and things like that, but it could definitely be a path to sort of get into the industry, is to review and then develop your own sort of following and things like that, and then say, well, I'd like to have a go at writing a script, or I'd like to do this, and move on.
Well, so do you have a question about, you were talking yesterday about critical writing. Maybe a question about the difference between a view and a critique.
Yeah. Well, obviously you got like movie reviews and everything, which are based in public. What about like critiques of work and academic reviews? Do you do any of that sort of thing?
For myself, I don't go as much onto the academic side because that's not my background. In terms of books, I think there's less avenues for that in the young adult sphere. A lot more academic critiques of books is of adult books. It's much more about the blogging and the reviewing, and personal opinion is still a really part of that. And I don't know if you've noticed, but one of the bigger new trends in reviewing books, particularly in the young adult sphere, is doing it by GIFs. That's not, that's not actually a way of necessarily building your own voice as a writer. It is a way that can get some attention and some audience, but I don't think it's a step that's going to help you towards getting your own book deal in the end, if that was one of your aims in being in that sphere in the beginning. In terms of my own voice and writing, when it says Inky or when it's talking with young adults, it's generally simpler and focusing on the positive. It's not something I do as often at the moment, but when we're talking with adults and teachers and librarians, it will be more critical. We will bring more of the negative into it, which is present in every book still, but often the good still outweighs the bad. So
I guess I'd look at it as the difference between reviewing and critiquing is what you're asking, aren't you? Personally, I would say if I was reviewing something, I'm starting from the bottom and building up. If I was critiquing something, I'm starting with a block and sort of chipping away at it. So that's sort of my visualisation of the difference between the two.
Really, that sounds like really well. I want to ask you though, I was really interested when you talked about how certain game developers will take you, to see the factory or to go overseas or go on a junket. What kind of what kind of level of research, and also what are some of the perks and the things that go on around the review?
So there are quite a few perks, and that's why you need to be careful to sort of remain a little bit aloof at times and independent. So basically, for quite a few years, I've never had to buy a video game because I just got sent everything from all the publishers. I've been sent consoles as well to sort of review the games on, and I've had about 4 or 5 trips overseas, fully paid, funded to see video games. Taken to interesting places, a rodeo in Texas, alcohol bought for me, all that sort of thing. And so it's quite important when I'm reviewing or talking about that I quite often turn that into a narrative and say this is what happened, so that it's always honestly up there that I got to take over, I went and did these interesting things, not as a brag, but just to sort of make it, make sure that people understand that I'm being upfront about that fact. And it is a sort of accepted part of the industry at the moment, and it's tightening up a little bit just because of budgets and things like that.
I'd say video games have money. Do you want a review?
Yeah.
Do them.
So that is the perks, and yes, it's quite a balance to try and sort of think, well, look, if I've got a $100 game in the mail, should I, do just to say it's 80% or whatever? But you have to sort of try and resist. And I've had unsolicited games sent to me, and I haven't covered them at all. And I've just sent an email saying thanks for the game, but I'm not going to cover it. If you want it back, no, they never do want it back. So in Australia, the whole PR system is very casual and friendly, and for my industry anyway. And so there's this sort of like, if you build yourself up as a brand, you get a few of these things attracting to you, and there are some perks to it. And sometimes if you write a review, you might just say, I was given a copy of the book, or I was given a free ticket, or things like that, just to have a bit of a disclaimer at the end, and then you sort of, making everything out in the open.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've started to notice, particularly in online publications, there's some movement towards this thing called native advertising and content marketing. And you have much experience with what that is?
No.
Essentially, advertisers are writing articles that read like someone's reviewing it. So they get a PR release. So instead of just being a press release, it's kind of
so like the Blockbuster video magazines and things like that, where it's all positive reviews and movies.
So that's something that's kind of I've seen online particularly. Has anyone got any questions for the panelists at all about reviews? Great.
This links back to your question, but I was going to ask, how does use like fan culture influence the transparency and truth of your work?
Personally? Good question. Can I think about that for a moment?
You say fan culture?
What do you mean by fan culture?
Well, with a great deal of games and novels, etc., there often comes with it a group of supporters, generally a very enthusiastic group of supporters. And if you were to publish a negative review of something that these people back up, you might get torn down by them.
So you talk about like the new Batman game and there's the 40 million Batman fans and things like that. Quite often what happens is that you'll develop an expertise in a certain area. So you won't get given a Batman game unless you're a fan of Batman or you know a lot about it to be able to appease that kind of culture. And generally, if you can back up your arguments and say, well, this is a horrible Batman game because of these reasons, people who are passionate about that will quite often anyway. So it's not too bad.
And even if those hardcore fans disagree with you, they'll be able to have a dialogue about
they can,
sure.
But no, that's why I've never reviewed a Pokemon game. Because there are adults who will be passionate about Pokemon and will tell you down about it.
I think for myself, I take the tread lightly approach that if I disagree with something that has a huge popularity, as a freelancer for myself, I probably wouldn't touch it, wouldn't review it. I have been in the situation where I'd agreed for someone else to review something, didn't know anything about it, read it, didn't like it, it was a fairly popular author, and it ended up being a really terrible review because I was basically trying to say nice things about something that I completely had no interest or agreement in. I don't actually know the answer for that one if you ever end up in that situation. If it's ever, I think, someone that you can open up a dialogue with and say, I know you want me to kind of do a positive review of this, but I don't feel like I can, you either need to be able to write it and lie very well through your teeth, or you need to be able to actually be in a position to go back and say to them, I can't do this, maybe you can find someone else. But is putting a certain risk on yourself as a brand and a writer, because they might have needed it in a week and you've taken so long to read the book, and trying to get it from someone else in a certain amount of time is a problem. So in general, I wouldn't. If it was for my day job, it's seeing why all of these people love it and actually talking to them, because if it's got that many fans, there's something about it that's good. Even if you're sitting there going, I don't get it.
With the Inky Awards, how do you initially choose the panel and the books that are being reviewed?
Good question. The initial books publishers put forward through a form on the website saying which ones they'd like to be considered. We compile all of those together, and it's a panel of basically all of the previous judges. So I think for this year that was about 20 teams that went through, and it was all done individually, that each of them said which ones they thought should be worthy, and again we compiled that data and brought it down to the original long list. The judges that then do the main critiquing work to make the shortlist, we do a call out on the Inside a Dog website in late March, early April-ish, and ask for applications. We get a lot and then have to select 6. And because everyone likes different things, part of what we do in selecting those is that people need to present their own voice really well, actually, in terms of having a unique opinion and being able to talk about what you want in an honest and fresh way. But also, everyone likes different things, so you may have noticed the John Green trend. A lot of the people applying this year all reference John Green, which is great, but we don't need 6 people that love John Green, because there's going to be some people out there that don't like John Green that will want to read different things, so trying to capture all of that.
We have a question from Kiralee on Twitter. Kira Lee. Kira Lee's in the Blue Mountains. She's asked, are there any specific sites that you should start writing reviews as a young teen? I guess the Inkies as the Inside Dog is great. But I guess in other fields, can you think of any ones that would be open to people, young people?
In terms of book reviewing, again, you're the target audience. If you want to review young adult books, there are so many places out there. Reviewing generally isn't paid, but not to the extent of film. I can't see a book reviewer ever getting an international trip, so lower expectations, but definitely free copies of books. A lot of publishers have basically what is their reviewer list, and it's a database, and their warehouse, when they get a copy, it just automatically dispenses books to anyone that's on that database. So if you're a book reviewer that ends up on those lists, chances are you'll be in this position where you start getting more than you want to actually review, and that's sometimes a negotiation with the publisher to say, we will only review things that I want to, rather than everything. Some people will try and review absolutely everything that hits their doorstep. But so more directly related to the question, I'm rambling. Get to know your local bookshop. Independent ones particularly, they're often looking for book reviewers, and actually even as I'm here today, I don't know if any of you are from Sydney. Jeff, would you like to... Glee Books in Sydney, I know they have a magazine that they put out. It goes to about 4,000 people. So in terms of building an audience, that's a lot of people reading something, and they are looking for young adults to review children and young adult titles. So if anyone's interested in that, drop by the store, or they've got an email address that you can send them an email.
And following on from what Robbie was saying, is that he used to run a website called The Thousands, which is essentially a city guide, and he would accept pitches. So I guess you could pitching is another way you could get out there, particularly on review sites like Time Out or whatever it is that's in your particular field of interest, whether it's music, film, whatever. There'll be people willing to take those, I imagine. And like Robbie said, it doesn't really matter what age you are when that happens. Any game-specific ones?
Some of the big websites, which I won't name, but there's lots of big gaming websites. You can have your own profile, and quite often attached to that profile, you can create like a little blog sort of thing where you can have like reviews and things like that. I guess discussion boards, if they're still a thing, because I used to post little mini reviews on discussion boards, just like a 100-word or 200-word thing. Or Blogger, or whatever, any other kind of free blogging sort of thing. Contacting websites that you know accept sort of free content. Being aware that you have to choose a point where you're going to sort of value your own work. So you have to maybe have a plan about how long you're going to write for free, or at what stage you feel you should be getting paid, because payment for freelancing is a problem across the board. We've all got to sort of have that in our heads, that we've got to think about the value of our writing. It's a fine line really to think about.
The whole building a profile to work with the payment.
Yeah, I think so.
Whether the people you're writing for are getting paid, and often they're not. So then I think in reviewing, there is a lot of writing for free.
Yeah, there is a lot. Unless you're writing for magazines or established websites with ad revenue, then there's no money.
So is the tip then to maybe aim for larger ones, or ones that
it's go for the the cash cows.
Aim high.
Yeah, aim high. Try your best, and don't take rejection as a personal thing, because it's either A, it wasn't the right thing at the time, B, it's already been done. Or C, you might just need to sort of up your pitching and develop writing a bit more.
And you are going to learn from that process as well.
Definitely.
One final question at all for Dylan or for Jordan? No. All right. Well, can everyone please give them a round of applause? Thank you very much, Dylan and Jordan.